So this is a slide where we ended previously. We ended with metabolic rates. When we talk about water loss, about 1500 ml or 1.5 liters of it is lost in the form of urine. We tend to lose about zero point 0.9 liters in the form of evaporation, hot day, sweating, and all of that. If you remember from our digestion chapter, we talked about it in the large intestine. In the large intestine, a large amount of water is reabsorbed into the system. However, that does not mean all of the water is reabsorbed. Some of it is lost to the system, lost from the system in the form of feces. Oh, I hate that word. Oh, back to the same problem. The, this kind of this is an image that kind of gives you an idea of all the different things that we've been talking about, of freshwater fish and saltwater fish, and what happens to the volume of urine, and why in the previous video we talked about why is it that saltwater fish have a smaller volume of urine. But remember, this, even though it is a small volume of urine, this urine is highly concentrated. They are trying to get the extra salts out of their system. Osmosis, diffusion, all that cool stuff. In the case of birds, there was something slightly more different. They do have two nasal glands. I'm pointing it on my nose, like you can see it. They have two nasal glands that also remove the salts. Remember, they eat a diet that is actually very rich in salt. If you have birds that eat animals, like little critters running around, mice and stuff like that, they do eat. Shoot. They also eat a lot of nuts and a lot of fruits and vegetables. They do have a certain amount of salt in them. Again, when we talk about salt, we're not talking about just organisms. We're not talking about just NaCl. Marine fish, on the other hand, have a lot. You know what? 1 second. Let me turn off this notification. So in the case of marine birds, remember, they are taking in a lot of salt water. They're eating fish that is pretty salty. So they are getting a lot of salts in. They have nasal glands that excrete salt. They have something called as a counter current exchange. It just is that think of it as two different tubes. One tube is carrying blood in one direction, and in the opposite direction of that. So I kind of took a break in the middle. So think of it as two separate tubes. One tube, you have water and other solutes flowing in. I'm sorry, blood and other solutes flowing in. The opposite direction of that is where you have salt ions flowing in. Also remember, most of these birds they don't have a separate excretory system and a separate urinary system. It's kind of a combination of both. Everybody has had like bird poop fall on them. Bird poop is basically a combination of pee and poo. So there's a lot of urea in it, there's a lot of salts in it, there is also whatever is left over from the digestion process. Give lots of calcium oxalates and stuff like that. So couple of things in besides the salts, besides water, urine also contains something called as uric acid, urea. You know that distinct weird smell that you get when someone pees their pants or there's pee somewhere. That smell is basically like if your dog pees and then you don't clean it up, there's like this weird distinct pee smell, and that's mostly because of urea. This is urea. Proteins and nucleic acids, both of them have an amine group to it and an NH3 group to it. That amine group is what forms the urea. This is the formula for urea, because remember, in the metabolic process, these things are broken down and they are parts of it are consumed, parts of it are excreted. In the case of reptiles, in the case of reptiles and birds, it's uric acid. It's slightly bigger group of things that forms uric acid. So it's more dilute. It's kind of a slurry kind of thing. In the case of fish, it's mostly ammonia. Each one of these things is a result of a different type of metabolic process. This is again, I don't require you to know the diagram of the uric acid, but you obviously need to know what ammonia is and what urea is. Yeah, we're going to look at essentially vertebrate urinary tract system. Every urinary tract system, regardless of what the organism is, there is a couple of basic features to it. There is a filtration process, whether it is the blood or the heme, or the heme, which is in insects. They have to go through a system of filtrations because blood is one, blood slash heme lymph. Heme lymph is in insects. So they carry the nutrients from point A to point B, nutrients that are gained in the digestive process. They're taken from point A to point B. They also carry waste materials. The waste materials have to go through some kind of filtration process. After a filtration process, there is an excretion, there is a reabsorption process. For example, in the human body, sometimes water is reabsorbed. Depending on the situation, water is reabsorbed, or salts are reabsorbed. It could be a potassium salt that's reabsorbed. It could be calcium salts. Different types of salts are reabsorbed. There is also a secretion that happens, which is excess water is let out, and then you basically have urine created. So urine is a combination of urea, if you're taking mammals. Now, it is a combination of water, different types of salts, urea, and a couple of other oxalate, oxalates, different types of acids. You should never see something like glucose, full proteins in your urine. You should never see blood in your urine. There should be no cells in your urine. The metabolic waste products. This filtration system, if it is working well, it should not allow these molecules like glucose, unless there is an excess of glucose in your bloodstream. For example, if you're diabetic, you're going to see a lot of glucose in the urine because there's so much of it, the body has to excrete it in some way, shape, or form. If you're, if you're not diabetic, then you should not see any urine in you should not see any kind of glucose in the end product. If you don't have, if your glomerulus capsule, in the case of the human beings, it's called the glomerulus capsule, the Bowman's capsule. If this thing is working perfectly, which means you don't have a kidney disease, then you should not see proteins in here. If you start seeing proteins here, then this is a semi-permeable membrane. So if you're seeing proteins in here, then something's wrong with the semi-permeable membrane. Let's look at a common invertebrate. How does it work for invertebrate? This is this has a true cecum. That means it has a true body cavity. You're going to see there is the capillary network. The capillary network is the one that's bringing the contaminated, the blood that needs to be purified, however you want to put it. That is that the capillary network actually brings stuff in that needs to be filtered. Then you have the filtering ductules. These are ducts that do the collecting ducts. There's filtration ducts. Then there's an external opening through which whatever is the excrement is, excrement as in exits the body. Again, I don't need you to kind of learn the whole thing. If you do zoology later on in life, you'll learn it. Just remember, this kind of exchange between a capillary network and a collecting tubule and a filtration process pretty much happens through the animal kingdom. Every vertebrates, invertebrates, all of them. This exchange here is happening through simple diffusion. In the case of insects, you're going to see a specialized tubules called the Malpighian tubules. Malpighian tubules are an extension of the alimentary canal itself. So it is absorbing all the other waste products like salt, nitrogenous waste. Nitrogenous waste is just urea, uric acid, and all of that stuff. It's absorbing all of that, kind of mixes itself into the feces, and then you have one excretion, one system of excretion. Remember, in the human system, we have two systems of excretion. There is excretion from the digestive system and the urinary tract system. In the case of insects, the tongue paralysis. Malpighian tubule kind of acts like a urinary tract system. So you're going to see this, but it kind of pours into the alimentary canal and then one excretion system. You're going to see a similar system in arthropods. You're going to see it in almost all insects. One of the things we don't know about this is we don't know if it is actually a convergent evolution that's happening between the two groups, or are they homologous features? So for people who have done environmental science, you should know that already. So one explained to the other. Okay, so now we're going to go into detail about the human urinary tract system. Let's start with just the anatomy portion of it. You obviously have two kidneys. Each kidney has about 1 million nephrons. Nephrons are just a specialized kidney cells. Most of your filtration and all of that cool stuff takes place in the nephron. The next portion we're going to look at it. This is the ureter. Ureter. This is the ureter. The urethra is different. This is the ureter. The ureter is basically, it is a lumen. If you remember in the previous chapter, we talked about it. When you have something that's a lumen, lumen meaning it is that kind of thing, a lumen. So it's hollow. This inside layer is coated with simple epithelial tissue. The outside is obviously connective tissue. Then it connects to the urinary bladder. The urinary bladder it's actually made of muscular connective tissue. It's a connective tissue on the outside. On the inside, again, it's a lumen. It's a hollow organ. This area is muscle tissue, whereas the inside here is still epithelial tissue. And underneath that is the urethra. In males, you have a longer urethra than in females. Blood comes in. Like always, blood comes in through the renal artery, leaves the system through the renal vein. Now, when you cross-section the kidney itself, you're going to see a couple of things. The outside of the kidney, which is this area, is called the renal cortex. Renal meaning kidney, cortex meaning outside. Renal cortex. This area here is your renal medulla. Medulla meaning on the inside, in the middle. Now, again, you take a cross section. If you just take this part of it and look at it, which is what this is. In this area right here, you're going to have cortical nephrons that are on the cortex, and then you have juxtamedular nephrons, which are right there, this area. So that's just the cross section of it. Again, I don't require you to go into detail about it. Just a couple of things to remember is this one here. Remember that. The urethra, I should have talked about this. The urinary bladder, again, has a sphincter, a muscular sphincter here that is involuntary, and then it has a muscular sphincter here that is voluntary. It can hold up anywhere from 2.5 to 4 liters of urine. A liter is not that much, but once it hits the 2.5, you kind of have to go to the bathroom. You kind of feel it. You literally have to go. You can hold on to it till you hit 4, but not a good idea. So I am going to stop with this slide, even though there's 1 minute, 20 seconds left on this thing, just because the next one, I don't want to break it in the middle. Okay.